All right, next week, a week from Tuesday, we're going to get our first CFP rankings, and we won't be going by the AP anymore. But for now, for this exercise for our college football bracket and our tier system, we are using the AP poll, and this is how the bracket would look at this point. Memphis would be the G5 team now. They knocked off South Florida. South Florida was in that position. That'd be a tough road trip for the old Tigers going into the Hedges to face Georgia in that opening round. Vandy, Georgia Tech. I'm sure every television exec would sign up for that. Never. That doesn't mean it wouldn't be a great game. I'm not one of those people saying, no, I don't want to see it. I actually do want to see it, and I know you guys do too. Tom Fornelli is here with Chip Patterson. Yeah, look, I love it that we have this. I really do. But let's break it down. We're going to go tier by tier. Tom Fornelli has given us 5 tiers. So we'll start at tier number 5. And you're labeling this pretending we have a shot. And it's a bunch of Big Ten teams that if they run the table would probably be in at 10-2.
Yeah, and that if they run the table is carrying a whole lot of weight because they are good teams. It's just they're also teams that I also see with fatal flaws that make it hard for me to believe that any of them will run the table and get to 10-2. I'm talking about Iowa, Michigan, Nebraska, USC, and Washington. And then I also, in the same tier, have thrown in Texas and Oklahoma. Texas is just the bane of my existence at this point. I keep waiting for it to suffer a third loss. It needed overtime to beat Kentucky. It needed to come back from 17 to come back and beat Mississippi State in overtime. I'm confident it's going to happen eventually. I just wish it would happen sooner rather than later. But I look at all these teams, like I said, they're all good. But they all have a very fatal flaw that makes it hard for me to believe they're going to win out from here, especially with a lot of the games remaining on their schedules. And also, in the Big Ten particularly, there's a lot of crossover between these teams.
You know, it's so funny. One of those teams, Tom, the Iowa Hawkeyes, and I did not realize we'd be with Chris Hassel when I said I wanted to discuss the Hawkeyes, but this has been about a month of good football from Kirk Ferentz' team. Obviously, they had to get a little healthier at the quarterback position, had to get settled, sort of figure out who they are. But, you know, the only loss in that span is by a narrow margin to Indiana in a game where I thought that they were able to control it and pull the Hoosiers into their kind of ball game. So Iowa, I don't know about running the table, but I'll tell you what, whether it's Oregon, whether it's USC, there are some teams that could have their college football playoff hopes ruined by the Iowa Hawkeyes, because if you just want to take them in terms of not the resume, but just the ball club and who they are right now, I think the Iowa Hawkeyes are a very dangerous crew from this tier of yours.
Here's the thing, Chris, you may want to put on earmuffs for this part, but I agree with you. Iowa's a very difficult team to play, and Indiana can speak to that. And when Oregon comes to Kinnick in a couple of weeks, they're not going to have a fun time. It's just The problem is Iowa hasn't beaten a ranked team since 2021. It's been 11 straight losses against ranked opponents, so it's hard for me to sit and think that Iowa's going to be able to go back-to-back with Oregon and USC, win both of those games, USC on the road. And then there's the rivalry game at the very end of the year against a good Nebraska team that's also on the road. It's just, I could see them going 3-1. I could see them giving Oregon all sorts of hell. I just can't see them going 4-0.
Yes. But if they do, in that dream,
if they do,
your Iowa Hawkeyes would be in the playoff. Let's go to tier 4 on Tom Fornelli's playoff tiers. There are automatic spots to fill. We know that. We've got to have a group of 5 team, and that would be Memphis as of right now if we're going by the AP. I am surprised, though, that you threw the entire ACC in, including Georgia Tech, into this tier.
Yeah, initially the name for this tier was just Shrug, because I have absolutely no idea what to make of either one of these races. Like, you're looking at the ACC right now. With Miami losing last week, it is possible, the way things play out and the way that their schedule's set up, we could see 3 ACC teams in the field depending on what happens elsewhere. It's also possible that the only ACC team we see will be the team that ends up winning the league. I have no idea who that team's going to be. I think it could be Georgia Tech. I think it's probably Miami. Virginia's in there with a shot. SMU is still alive. It's a complete jumble of teams at the top of that conference who are all capable of beating one another in any single week. So it's hard to sit there and say, I am super confident that this team will pull through and win it. Like, Miami could be in an advantageous spot where maybe they win out, but they don't reach the ACC championship game, which gives them a shot to get in as an at large. And as for the G6, I mean, with USF losing to Memphis on Saturday, that just completely opens the door for a whole lot of teams in the American. So it's really tough to predict which one of those teams will be in there, but one of them has to be.
Two thoughts here, both on my beloved ACC. All four of those ranked teams in the ACC, they are all on the road in Week 10. What could go wrong, right? Four ranked ACC teams on the road, college football playoff hopes. The other piece of this that stands out is two of those four teams, Georgia Tech and Louisville, they have games at the end of the season, the final week of the regular season against an SEC opponent. And I understand Georgia and Kentucky are existing on opposite ends of the spectrum in most people's rankings. When they played football against each other, that game was pretty close. And so Georgia Tech or Louisville, both of them would have a chance to boost any kind of at-large argument with a non-conference game in the last week of the regular season. Something to keep an eye on here as it pertains to the CFP.
So you got the whole ACC there in Tier 4. I find it interesting you have the Big 12 a tier above or below, I guess, however you want to look at it. Tier 1 being the best. At Tier 3, it's the whole Big 12 and Vandy.
Yeah, my feisty foes, teams that I think are kind of like punching above their weight a little bit. But while I believe they could get to the college football playoff, I don't know if they're going to win any games. Once they get there, I look at Vanderbilt. It's been one of the better stories in the country this year. They are one of the genuinely better teams in the SEC, and I have argued that they could end up winning the SEC. It's just we also saw last week against Missouri, they could also lose a game against a team they're not supposed to lose to, and they're going on the road to face that dang Texas team I just can't get rid of this weekend, that I'm sure Texas will win and stay alive and drive me crazy for another week. But as we get to the Big 12, I looked at Texas Tech as being a head above everybody else within that league. But since the last few weeks, Texas Tech is getting hit with injuries. Baron Morton's banged up. Their backup, Will Hammond, is out for the season with a torn ACL. Skylar Gill-Howard, one of their best players in their defensive line, is probably out for the rest of the regular season. That opens the door for Cincinnati and BYU, who are still undefeated in conference play, as well as the Houston team that still only has one loss. So it's hard to know which one of those teams is going to emerge, but one of them will. And I do think that, right now, it's just I don't see any of them winning a game in the playoff unless they get a bye, and I don't see them getting a bye.
I really need Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark to understand some life lessons that I learned just last year, really, is that your life is better when you read Tom Fornelli. You make better decisions. You have a better view of the world. The context, the insight that he provides is really remarkable, because Tom Fornelli wrote weeks ago, Chris, that they should just wrap up Texas Tech in bubble wrap, declare them the champions, and send them to the college football playoff, because there was no team when fully healthy who would give the Big 12 a better chance of making a deep run in this college football playoff than Texas Tech. And what happened since then? Well, Texas Tech has lost two more quarterbacks to injury, one for the season. Their best defensive tackle's been knocked out. Our pets' heads are falling off. I mean, you had a chance, Brett Yormark, if you had just read Tom Fornelli, followed his instructions, declared Texas Tech the champs, you'd have a great team, not a feisty foe, no, a great team. But as it stands, it looks like it's just going to be one of those years where the Red Raiders are just going to always be saying what if, because they're still really good. I like this roster. I like this coaching staff. But we're always going to wonder what would have happened if they'd stayed healthy in 2025.
Now, still win out, get to the Big 12 championship game, win that, get in, and then who knows what happens. But we go to Tier 2 here, and these are the teams that are thinking they're in. The teams that, on paper right now, like an Ole Miss, you're sitting there with one loss, you have a handful of good wins, and you're going to be heavily favored in the rest of the games. It's four teams, though, Tom, that maybe can't afford much of a slip-up, especially Notre Dame. When going through these teams, which one do you believe is on the most precarious of spots of the four?
I would say of the four, I look at Georgia simply as being in more danger only because of what they have left on their schedule. I do feel like they have a more difficult schedule than either of the other three have. Whereas, you look at this week's game against Florida, I don't think anybody views the Gators as a serious threat. I mean, they did just fire their coach, so they're not in a good position. But this is a huge rivalry game, and Florida is still very talented, so who knows? Crazier things have happened. And then at the end of the year, they have to play the Georgia Tech team we discussed a couple tiers ago, and last year against Georgia Tech, they needed like 7 overtimes to get out of there with their skin, still intact. So it's a difficult path for them, but I look at them all 4, and I don't really see more than 2 losses. Like, I could see Georgia losing once, but it's not going to lose twice. I could see Oregon losing once, but not twice, and the same with Ole Miss. Whereas you talked about Notre Dame, they're the one team that cannot afford another loss at all, but look at their schedule. Where's the loss? I don't see it. Their only 2 difficult games this year were the first 2 games that they played, which they lost both. But I don't know. I just feel like Boston College and Navy and those guys aren't going to provide much resistance for the Irish at this point.
Maybe week 1. We would have been talking about a different Pitt Panthers team, but no. Since turning the offense over to true freshman quarterback Mason Heischel, this boy is balling. 420-plus yards against NC State. While I understand that NC State is not Notre Dame, they even have a common opponent to prove that. You say, where's the loss? How about November 15th? Because I look at Notre Dame's final schedule. They got 5 games. They got 3 of those games on the road. And I agree with you. Boston College and Stanford, those are 2 of the teams very much at the bottom of the ACC. Pretty good ACC draw for the Fighting Irish, if I may point out. But that November 15th game with the season riding on it, that is going to be awfully dangerous for Notre Dame. 5 games, 0 room for error. It's going to be egg and a spoon status for Marcus Freeman's squad coming down the stretch.
Chip, you're pretty familiar with the ACC. Pitt's played well, but they've done it against the ACC and not exactly the top half of the ACC in recent weeks. I give them credit. They look good the last few weeks, and sure, Pat Narduzzi would love nothing more than to destroy Notre Dame's season if given the opportunity. It's just beating up on Boston College, not the same thing as beating up on Notre Dame. I do not see the Panthers having that kind of success.
Do they need any style points here in these remaining games, Notre Dame?
I definitely think they should go for it when they get the opportunity, like especially this week against Boston College. You're favored by 28, win by 40, because you do need, even if you finish 10-2, there's no guarantee that you're going to get an at-large spot depending on how things play out in the ACC and the Big 12. You might find your resume compared to other teams who have slightly better resumes than you. So make it look as good as you can whenever you get the chance.
It'll be interesting to see where they place Notre Dame a week from tomorrow on Tuesday, Chip.
Yeah, I was going to say a win by any margin gets you in, but if you want to make a run in the playoff, do what you did last year and beat up on everybody coming down the stretch.
All right, only 1 tier left, and I count 4 teams. I guess the 4 teams you believe in position for a bye and the 4 teams that Tom Fornelli says can win it all. Who are they?
Yeah, they're Ohio State, Indiana, Alabama, and Texas A&M. And this is going very much against type for how I have normally felt, because the reality of the situation is every single year, I always feel like there's no more than 2 teams that have a legitimate shot of winning the national title. For the most part, I would say Ohio State is the clear favorite among these 4, but I don't think the gap between them is as wide as it has been in recent seasons. I do think if Ohio State were to suffer a couple injuries, they could be very susceptible. And this is an Indiana team that we have seen now after going on the road to beat Oregon by 10 in Autzen Stadium is not to be dismissed. Alabama, the team that played Florida State in the season opener, is not the team we have seen since. They look electric. They have a quarterback who time and time again in crunch time has made plays, and in the playoff you need that to get through against top teams. And then I look at the Aggies, and they decimated LSU in Tiger Stadium on Saturday night, but this is just a very complete team to where you might not look at them as being elite in any single area outside of maybe their offensive line, but there's really no weakness either. There's no spot you look at and say that's where we can get them. So I just look at them as a complete team, and I think that they could make a run, particularly if they do end up getting a first-round bye and a little bit easier path because of it. So these are the 4 teams where I feel confident now. I don't know who our national champion will be this year, but I would bet it's one of these 4.
Yeah, Texas A&M is the one that has joined this list recently for me as well. Just how well they performed in all 3 phases against LSU in that spot. Even how a game that was close, they blew it open. These are the traits of a very good football team. I am a believer on the Aggies in a way that I was not even a month ago.
All right, Chip Patterson and Tom Fornelli with us here on HQ as we go through Tom's college football playoff tiers each and every Monday, with the college football playoff rankings coming out next Tuesday, 8 days away. Very latest Cover 3 podcast upon further review, Monday edition. More on the Brian Kelly fallout, rankings reaction, and more updated CFP bracket projections.